He was sitting on his couch, eating ice cream in the safety of his own home, when a stranger with a badge walked through his door. One wrong floor, one wrong door, one fatal mistake. The officer was Amber Guyger, a Dallas patrol officer whose split-second decision that night in 2018 would change not only her life, but the lives of several families. Born in 1988, Amber had served on the force for several years. She lived in the same apartment complex as the man whose life would soon be taken, Botham Jean. On September 6, 2018, after finishing a long and tiring shift, Amber drove home while still in uniform. She parked her car on a level higher than usual and walked to what she believed was her own apartment. But she entered the wrong unit. Inside was 26-year-old Botham Jean, an accountant from St. Lucia. He was relaxing at home, eating ice cream. Moments later, the situation took a tragic turn when Amber fired her weapon, thinking she was facing an intruder. The event quickly spread across the country. Prosecutors decided to charge her with a serious offense instead of a lesser one. Amber said she truly believed she had entered her own apartment. She thought a stranger was inside and fired 2 rounds in fear. Investigators reviewed her emergency call and studied every detail of the scene. They collected evidence, listened to witnesses, and later heard her own testimony. These elements became the center of the trial. Prosecutors argued that what happened was not simply a mistake, but an unreasonable use of force. They said Amber had missed clear signs showing she was in the wrong place, such as the floor number, the layout, and the door markings. From their view, no reasonable person in her position should have acted the way she did. They asked jurors to consider the scene from Botham's perspective, as an unarmed man inside his home. The defense told a different story. They said she was exhausted after a long shift, confused and genuinely frightened when she saw someone inside what she thought was her own apartment. That difference between fear and reason became the main question in court. During her testimony, Amber said she fired because she was scared and believed the person inside would harm her. She described trying to help afterward and said she realized only later that she was in the wrong unit. Prosecutors presented text messages and social media posts that they said reflected poor judgment. These were shown to the jury during sentencing. Botham's family spoke about his life, his kindness, and their loss. Their words were emotional and heartfelt. Botham's younger brother later made a gesture that drew attention around the world. In court, he told Amber that he forgave her and hugged her. The moment was powerful and widely shared, but it did not change the legal decision. Many people asked one question: why didn't she stop to check the door number before entering? Evidence showed several chances to notice the mistake. Prosecutors said that as a trained officer, she should have taken time to assess the situation instead of reacting so quickly. They claimed she failed to observe the scene fully and acted in a way that was not reasonable. The defense responded by saying that exhaustion and fear caused her to react without thinking clearly. Witness accounts and evidence created a detailed timeline that challenged her version of events. The trial lasted several days and was emotionally heavy. Jurors heard from many witnesses, including Amber herself. They saw her messages and social media posts, and they listened to Botham's family talk about how deeply their lives had changed. After careful consideration, the jury found her guilty. On October 2, 2019, the court sentenced her to 10 years in prison. The decision made national headlines. People talked not only about the fact that an officer had taken the life of an unarmed man in his own home, but also about how rare such convictions are. The emotional scene of forgiveness in the courtroom sparked discussions about justice, mercy, and accountability. Amber later appealed her conviction. She said the evidence did not prove intent and claimed that mistakes had been made during the trial. The appeals moved through several courts, but the original decision remained in place each time. While Amber served her time in a Texas correctional facility, Botham's family pursued a separate civil case. They filed a lawsuit saying their loved one's rights had been violated. In late 2024, a federal jury ruled in their favor. The court ordered Amber to pay nearly $98.65 million in damages, combining both compensation and penalties. This was far more than the family had originally asked for and showed another form of accountability beyond the criminal trial. That civil verdict, along with the earlier conviction, became part of a lasting legal record that tied Amber personally to what happened that night. In 2024, Amber became eligible for parole after serving half of her sentence. Many people, including Botham's family and their supporters, urged the parole board not to approve her release. In October 2024, the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles denied her parole request. The decision meant she would stay in custody until the next review date set by the board. That decision reflected continued concern about the seriousness of what had happened and its lasting impact on everyone involved. Up next are 8 shots, 1 bystander, and a truth that couldn't be hidden. Michael Thomas Slager was born in November of 1981 and grew up in New Jersey. For years, he wore a police uniform that gave him the legal authority to stop people, search them, and use force when he believed it was necessary. That officer was Michael Slager, a former member of the North Charleston Police Department. His name became known nationwide after a traffic stop took a tragic turn. Before joining the police, Slager had served in the U.S. Coast Guard. By the time of the incident, he had been working as an officer for about 5 years. Public records show he was married and expecting a child in 2015. His life seemed ordinary: steady work, a family, and a background in service. But everything changed in one moment when he drew his service weapon and fired it. The entire event was caught on camera. On April 4, 2015, Slager stopped Walter Scott because of a broken brake light. Scott got out of his car and ran away. Slager chased him. During the chase, Slager used his stun gun, and Scott fell. Scott then stood up and ran again. Footage from Slager's patrol car and a bystander's cell phone completely changed the story. The video showed Scott running away with his back turned when Slager pulled out his .45 caliber Glock and fired 8 times from a distance. 5 of the bullets hit Scott from behind. Slager then called in on his radio, saying, "Shots fired and the subject is down. He grabbed my taser." But the video clearly showed that Scott was running away, not turning toward him. The coroner later confirmed that one of the bullets struck Scott's lungs and heart. The legal process that followed was slow and complex. Slager first said he acted in self-defense, claiming Scott had taken his stun gun and posed an immediate danger. But the witness video told a different story. That contradiction became the heart of the case. The law requires that any use of force by an officer must be reasonable and necessary. Prosecutors argued that Slager's actions were neither. Federal investigators and a state grand jury both got involved. In June 2015, the state charged Slager with taking a life unlawfully. Federal prosecutors also charged him with violating civil rights and trying to mislead investigators. The Justice Department and the FBI led the federal case, while the state trial moved separately. Slager's record before this incident added more context. During his years on the force, several people had complained about his behavior. Some claimed he used his stun gun on them without good reason. Internal notes said he was skilled at handling the device, but some reports described him as too aggressive in certain situations. None of those earlier complaints led to criminal charges, but they resurfaced in public discussions after the video came out. People looked back and wondered if warning signs had been ignored. The key question that followed was simple: why fire 8 times at a man who was running away? Slager said he was afraid for his safety. Prosecutors argued that fear alone did not justify firing on someone who was unarmed and fleeing. The state trial took place in late 2016. After weeks of testimony, the jury could not reach a unanimous decision. The result was a mistrial. That outcome frustrated many people. Some believed there was enough doubt to justify the indecision. Others felt the system had failed to hold a police officer accountable. But the federal case continued. In May 2017, Slager admitted guilt to one federal charge, violating Walter Scott's civil rights under color of law, which led to his passing. In exchange, other federal charges were dropped, and the state's case was closed. The agreement also included a statement that Slager's actions were equal to what would be considered second-degree homicide under the law. During the sentencing process, prosecutors said Slager's actions and later attempts to alter the scene showed clear obstruction. His lawyers asked for a lighter sentence, arguing he acted in a split-second situation and had family responsibilities. The judge disagreed. Based on federal guidelines, the court sentenced him to 20 years in prison on December 7, 2017. At the hearing, Slager spoke directly to Walter Scott's family and the judge. He apologized, saying, "I wish this never would have happened. I wish I could go back to that day and change everything. But I can't." The judge acknowledged his words, but made it clear that the use of force had been excessive, and that his actions after the event had worsened the situation. The sentence was unusually long compared to similar cases involving officers, showing the court's view that his actions crossed a legal line. Investigators later said they believed Slager had moved his stun gun closer to Scott's body after the shooting. This point was central to the obstruction claim because it suggested an attempt to make it seem as if Scott had been a threat. Dashcam and cell phone footage became the foundation of the case. One video showed Slager leaving and returning to his car, while the other captured the full sequence of events. The difference between what Slager told dispatchers and what appeared in the footage was too large to ignore. After sentencing, Slager was moved to a federal prison to begin his 20-year term. He filed appeals, claiming his legal representation had failed him and that his punishment was too harsh. Courts reviewed those appeals and rejected them. In January 2019, his appeal was denied, and in 2021, another motion for a reduced sentence was also rejected. Public records list him as a federal inmate. Based on standard calculations, he must serve most of his sentence since there is no parole in the federal system. According to those records, he remains behind bars today. The next woman trained others to act under pressure for decades, then one day she couldn't. Kimberly Potter was a veteran officer, someone trusted by her small suburban department to train new recruits. For 26 years, Kim Potter wore the uniform of the Brooklyn Center Police Department. She was a field training officer and a mother. By most accounts, she had built a long and ordinary career until one afternoon changed everything. The official case record lists her date of birth as June 18, 1972. It describes a routine event that turned into a national story. On April 11, 2021, officers stopped a white Buick for an expired tag and a hanging air freshener. Inside the car sat a young man named Daunt Wright, 20 years old. A trainee officer was present, and Potter was there as his trainer. Things escalated quickly. Officers tried to detain Wright because of an outstanding warrant. According to video shown later in court, Wright got back into his car. A struggle followed near the driver's door. Within seconds, the situation went from controlled to chaotic. Potter shouted, "Taser! Taser! Taser!" and fired once. Wright drove away but crashed a short distance down the road. He lost his life soon after. Potter later told investigators that she meant to use her taser, but accidentally grabbed her firearm instead. That single action became the center of the entire case. Prosecutors said she acted recklessly, and that her handling of a loaded weapon caused the loss of a young man's life. The defense said she made a tragic mistake in a moment of pressure. The state filed 2 charges, first-degree and second-degree manslaughter. Both were based on reckless handling of a firearm. For the public, the image of a veteran officer shouting, "Taser," as a man collapsed, was powerful. Protests began within hours. The city's police chief and Kim Potter both stepped down soon after. Potter's record became an important part of the trial. She had never fired her duty gun in all her years on the force. Her record was mostly clean except for a minor reprimand years earlier. Prosecutors argued that a long career did not excuse carelessness. The defense used the same record to say she was not a danger to society and did not deserve a long punishment. The trial began in late 2021. Jurors watched body camera and dash camera videos showing the traffic stop. They saw the calm start, the quick exchange at the window, and then the sudden chaos. They heard Potter shout "Taser" before realizing her mistake. Witnesses explained how the scene shifted so fast that no one had full control. Prosecutors asked the jury to see her actions as reckless, not accidental. The defense said she never intended harm, and it was a human error made under stress. After about 27 hours of discussion, the jury found her guilty of both first-degree and second-degree manslaughter. The key question was intent. If an officer says she meant to use a taser but fired a gun, what does that mean in legal terms? The court had to weigh the difference between human error and criminal responsibility. The jury decided that, regardless of her intention, her actions met the legal definition of recklessness. When it was time for sentencing, the courtroom was emotional. Dante, Wright's family spoke about their pain and confusion. They asked how a mistake could take away a loved one. Potter also spoke. She turned toward Wright's family and apologized. Her voice shook as she said, "I am so sorry that I hurt you so badly. My heart is broken and devastated for all of you." Judge Regina Chu called it one of the saddest cases she had ever handled. She said Potter's act was a tragic error, not something done with intent. The court sentenced Potter to 2 years in prison. She was expected to serve about 16 months behind bars and the rest under supervision. That sentence was far less than what prosecutors had asked for. Some members of the public and Wright's family said the punishment was too light. Others pointed to Potter's clean record and the judge's belief that she did not pose a future threat. The trial raised a difficult question. Why did she reach for the wrong weapon? Experts explained that stress, muscle memory, and the weight difference between a gun and a taser can cause confusion. Prosecutors countered that officers are trained repeatedly to prevent such mistakes. The jury agreed that even with those factors, her handling of the weapon was reckless. Under Minnesota law, the first-degree charge carried a maximum of 15 years, and the second-degree charge carried up to 10 years. But the judge considered several factors before deciding. She viewed the act as tragic but unplanned, and that belief led to a lighter sentence. Many people felt the outcome did not match other similar cases. They compared her punishment with sentences given to other officers in similar situations. Potter began serving her time shortly after. She completed about 16 months and was released in April 2023 under supervision. Officials said she was released early in the morning to prevent protests and for her safety. Meanwhile, Wright's family continued to seek justice beyond the criminal court. They pursued civil actions, and the city reached settlements with them and others affected by the crash. Those agreements closed one legal chapter but left many community questions unanswered. Up next are 16 shots in 15 seconds, and a video that Chicago tried to keep hidden. If you find stories like this important, consider subscribing. Jason Van Dyke's story began like many others on the police roster. He grew up in the suburbs of Hinsdale, finished high school in the mid-90s, earned a degree in criminal justice, and joined the Chicago Police Department in 2001. His life revolved around his job. He got married, had 2 children, and worked different assignments across the city. But one night in October 2014 changed everything. It was a night that would turn his name into headlines and reshape a part of Chicago's history. That night, he fired 16 rounds during a single incident. The moment was captured on a dashboard camera, and those images would later turn his life upside down. Before that night, Van Dyke's record already showed warning signs. Over the years, about 20 people had filed complaints against him. Nearly half claimed that he had used more force than necessary, and a few said he had drawn his weapon. Most of those complaints didn't lead to formal punishment, but together, they showed that he often had tense encounters with people he stopped or searched. Investigators later said that officers and supervisors rarely took action against him, even when those complaints built up. That pattern became important later, when prosecutors argued that his use of force often went beyond what was reasonable. On the night of October 20th, 2014, officers, including Van Dyke, responded to reports about a young man named Laquan McDonald. The report said the teen was breaking into trucks and carrying a sharp object. Van Dyke and his partner drove to the scene and radioed for updates. Their squad car's dashcam recorded everything that followed. When the video was later released, it showed McDonald walking down the middle of the street. The police SUV pulled up, Van Dyke stepped out, and within seconds, he began firing. He fired 16 rounds in about 15 seconds. The footage shocked many people because it didn't match the official story. The original police report said McDonald had rushed toward the officers, but the video showed him moving away when many of the shots were fired. That difference became the heart of the case against Van Dyke. Van Dyke said he fired because he believed his life was in danger. He claimed that McDonald had raised the sharp tool, and he feared being hurt. On the stand, he said he focused on the tool and shot toward it because he was afraid. Prosecutors challenged that claim by showing the video and other evidence. They pointed out that McDonald appeared to be stepping away, not toward the officers. They also mentioned something Van Dyke reportedly said while driving to the scene. "Oh my God, we're going to have to shoot the guy." That line made things worse for him because it suggested that he might have expected to use force before even arriving. The legal process took time. The dashcam footage stayed hidden from the public for more than a year while internal reviews were underway. But in November 2015, a judge ordered it to be released. Once it went public, there was outrage across the city. Protests spread, and officials faced heavy criticism. The city soon agreed to pay McDonald's family $5 million, which was a sign that this case would not be handled quietly. After that, Van Dyke was charged with first-degree unlawful homicide in late 2015. His trial took place 3 years later, in 2018. The case carried enormous weight, not only for him, but also for a city already struggling with strained police-community relations. During the trial, prosecutors tried to show that Van Dyke's actions were not the result of sudden fear. They brought in other officers who were at the scene, and none of them had fired their weapons. Experts mapped out where each bullet hit and how the scene unfolded. The defense focused on Van Dyke's fear. He said that McDonald raised the tool and that he fired because he believed he was in danger. The jury had to balance two ideas: giving an officer room to defend himself, but also deciding when force goes too far. After days of testimony and video reviews, they found Van Dyke guilty of second-degree unlawful homicide and 16 counts of aggravated battery. The verdict showed that the jury believed Van Dyke was afraid, but also believed he went too far. To many, this was an important moment for accountability. To others, the outcome still felt incomplete. In January 2019, Judge Vincent Gone sentenced Van Dyke to 81 months in prison, a little under 7 years. The defense asked for probation and submitted letters from family and colleagues asking for leniency. The prosecution wanted a longer sentence, arguing that every shot mattered. The judge acknowledged the pain on both sides, but chose a middle ground. Some legal experts said the sentence left room for debate, and higher courts were later asked to review it. The Illinois Supreme Court eventually decided not to increase the sentence. Before the sentence was announced, Van Dyke spoke briefly in court. He said he was deeply sorry for what had happened to Laquan McDonald, and that he would have to live with it for the rest of his life. His words sounded sincere to some, but empty to others. McDonald's family and community members said they felt justice was still missing. That divide reflected how split the city was, both in the courtroom and beyond. Van Dyke served only part of his sentence. He was released early in February 2022 for good behavior, under state rules that allow credit for time served. His early release caused fresh anger among people who already thought his punishment was too short. Federal investigators looked into the case again, but decided not to bring additional charges. Van Dyke eventually dropped all appeals and began rebuilding his life. But the public debate over accountability and police conduct did not fade. Many people in Chicago continued to ask the same question: was justice really served? There were also deeper layers to the case. The delay in releasing the dashcam footage led to investigations into whether officials had tried to keep the video hidden. The case also led to resignations in city leadership and forced changes in how police complaints were handled. Van Dyke's long history of complaints, the settlement with McDonald's family, the video, the protests, the trial, and the short sentence, all became part of a larger conversation about policing and fairness in America. The next man was called a cop, but the streets knew him as something else. Michael Dowd grew up in New York City. He joined the NYPD in the early 1980s, a time when parts of the city were under extreme pressure from the crack epidemic and rising street chaos. As a rookie in the 75th Precinct in East New York, he quickly learned that the job could be as dangerous as it was tempting. The badge that should have made him a protector became something he used for personal gain. From the beginning, his life split into two paths. One was the official duty of daily patrols. The other was a secret world of private deals that grew bigger and riskier every year. Dowd's actions read like a list of betrayals. He took money from local dealers instead of arresting them. He warned traffickers about upcoming police operations. He even gave them protection, information, and sometimes access to police resources. Using his position, he located targets for his partners in wrongdoing and sometimes handed people over to dangerous groups instead of bringing them in through the system. Investigators later said he ran a network that moved illegal substances from New York City into Suffolk County on Long Island. He helped organize the flow of cash and product, collecting thousands of dollars each week for himself. These payouts became his main motivation, far beyond any sense of duty. Some episodes made the corruption impossible to hide. Investigations revealed that Dowd and his partners once planned to abduct a woman linked to an underground debt. Video and audio recordings captured him talking about ways to steal money and escape the country if things went wrong. His partner, Ken Ural, eventually began working with investigators and secretly recorded their conversations. Those tapes became crucial evidence against Dowd. Why did he risk everything? The simple answer was money and the feeling that he could get away with it. Dowd often compared his small NYPD salary with the quick cash he saw in the streets. When arrests led to large amounts of money or illegal substances, the temptation to keep some of it was immediate. Over time, the line between officer and lawbreaker faded. He began to see himself as both, which made his behavior feel almost normal to him. How did he think he'd never be caught? He trusted his badge, his ties with dealers, and the weak internal oversight of that era. He believed his inside knowledge could help him dodge investigations, and that no one close to him would ever speak out. That confidence collapsed when other officers and federal investigators began closing in. Some of his partners turned against him, and the recordings captured his own voice planning deals that left little room for doubt. The case grew step by step. Federal and local agencies, including the DEA, Suffolk County Police, and NYPD Internal Affairs, joined forces to uncover his operation. In the early 1990s, Dowd admitted guilt to charges of racketeering and conspiracy related to narcotics. This confirmed that he had been running an illegal enterprise under the cover of being a police officer. During the hearings, Dowd also cooperated with the Mullen Commission, a special inquiry created to investigate police corruption. His testimony revealed shocking details that left the public and city leaders stunned. The commission's findings showed how deeply misconduct had spread inside the department. In court, prosecutors presented a clear picture of a man who had turned police work into a money-making tool. They showed evidence of raids that never happened because Dowd had warned the targets in advance. They explained how he shared police weapons and badges with his partners, handed certain suspects to cartel groups, and ran an underground network that used his police knowledge to stay hidden. The defense tried to claim these were isolated mistakes, not a pattern. But the tapes and financial records told a different story. They showed consistent involvement in organized illegal activity. The atmosphere in court was one of disbelief, mixed with a grim understanding of how long the corruption had gone unnoticed. When the verdict came, it was harsh. Dowd received a long prison sentence for racketeering and substance conspiracy. Reports vary on the exact number. Some say 14 years, others 16. But he ended up serving around 12 years before his release. While in prison, Dowd said he joined counseling programs and helped run addiction and self-harm prevention groups. Public records mention that he spent his time reading, exercising, and trying to rebuild himself. When he was released, he returned to society as a controversial public figure, known for his wrongdoing, but also for speaking openly about it. Did he feel regret? In interviews, Dowd admitted guilt and discussed the choices that ruined his career. His tone often shifted. Sometimes he sounded deeply sorry, other times he spoke as if explaining a bad business decision. After his release, Dowd became the focus of the documentary The 7-5. The film used interviews, recordings, and testimony from his former partners to show how his life spiraled from patrol duty to a prison cell. The film brought him attention again, both fascination and anger from the public. Now, how far will a city go to protect its own officers, even when the evidence says otherwise? Jon Burge grew up on the south side of Chicago. On paper, his life looked like a model of service. He served in the Army, earned a Bronze Star, and worked his way up in the Chicago Police Department. He became a detective and later a commander. But behind that professional image, something much darker was happening. For around 20 years, under Burge's watch, or through his own actions as later testimony showed, many men, mostly black, faced extremely harsh treatment during interrogations. These sessions were meant to force confessions. Survivors described being given electric shocks on sensitive areas, being hit repeatedly, and even suffocated with plastic covers placed over their heads. Some said they were threatened with weapons or made to believe they might lose their lives if they did not cooperate. These were not random incidents. Investigators later connected a pattern involving several detectives who worked under Burge on the South Side. The same methods appeared again and again in different cases. The events took place inside police stations and interrogation rooms, but their impact spread across Chicago. Many men signed statements that were not true. Some were convicted based on those statements. A few were even sent to the state's highest punishment level. Over time, families, civil rights lawyers, and journalists gathered stories that built a clear picture. Men came out of custody with lasting injuries. Some said they confessed only after hours of mistreatment. Lawyers argued that juries had been shown confessions forced through fear and pain. These reports stretched from the 1970s to the 1990s. It took years before the system began to face what really happened. Why would someone like Burge, a decorated officer, use such methods? That question led to debates about motive. Some experts pointed to his military experience in Vietnam. They believed he brought certain interrogation habits from war zones, using physical force and fear to get fast answers. Others said the issue ran deeper. They pointed to a police culture that rewarded high conviction rates, encouraged aggressive tactics, and protected officers who crossed the line. Racist attitudes towards certain neighborhoods and suspects also played a role. Whatever the reason, the result was the same. Men confessed to things they could not recall or did not do, and the city had to confront how its own officers became the cause of such harm. Legal action took time. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, people began filing civil suits. In 1989, one major trial ended without a verdict because the jury could not agree. Burge stayed in the department for some time after that. Internal investigations and outside reviews continued to uncover the same accusations. But charging him for the acts themselves became difficult. The statute of limitations, a legal time limit, had expired for many cases. Prosecutors said the evidence clearly showed wrongdoing, but they could no longer file direct criminal charges. So they found another path. Burge was charged not for the acts themselves, but for lying under oath about them. In 2010, a federal jury found him guilty of perjury and obstruction of justice. This meant he was convicted for denying under oath that he had taken part in or allowed the violent interrogations. The verdict was based on survivor testimony and documents that proved Burge's statements were false. The Justice Department said the conviction focused on the cover-up, the years of false denials that had hidden the truth. In January 2011, a federal judge sentenced him to 54 months in prison, about 4.5 years, followed by supervised release. The judge said the punishment was higher than normal because of how serious Burge's actions were and how many people had been affected. But that trial was just one part of a much larger story. Civil lawsuits followed. Survivors and their lawyers pushed for pardons and relief. In 2003, Illinois Governor George Ryan pardoned 4 men who had been facing the state's highest penalty after being forced into false confessions during Burge's time. This move, along with many later exonerations, changed public debate about police conduct and punishment laws in Illinois. Chicago eventually paid out tens of millions of dollars to settle cases connected to Burge and his detectives. The city also approved a reparations package for survivors. It included financial compensation, counseling, and educational support. These steps showed that city leaders accepted that serious wrongdoing had taken place under Burge's command. The survivors' stories made the impact personal. Some said they were taken from their cells late at night, blindfolded and shocked with electric devices. Others described being terrified until they finally signed papers just to make it stop. Some were as young as teenagers. Most were black men from neighborhoods that already struggled with strained relations with police. Lawyers said many of the stories lined up closely with one another. Medical records, showing injuries, scars, and other evidence, supported their accounts. For many survivors, justice never felt complete. Some had their convictions overturned, others did not. Many spent years behind bars for acts they said they never committed. In court, Burge's lawyers denied everything. They questioned the reliability of witnesses and said memories fade over time. The prosecution focused on repeated patterns, the same methods, the same types of wounds, and the same culture of silence inside the department. The jury had to decide whether Burge had lied to protect himself and a system that allowed such harm. The verdict made clear that they believed he had. Burge never gave a full public apology. He denied being directly involved in the harsh interrogations until the end. After completing his federal sentence, he was released to a halfway house and later moved to Florida. In 2018, he passed away at the age of 70 after dealing with cancer. Now, how does a national hero become a federal inmate in less than a decade? Bernard Kerik grew up in Newark, New Jersey. He was a tough, straightforward man who built a reputation through hard work and confidence. He left school early, joined the U.S. Army, and later worked in correctional facilities before joining the New York Police Department. Kerik climbed the ranks quickly. His direct style and willingness to lead from the front made him a public figure. He was born in 1955, and his years in the military and law enforcement shaped him into someone who valued discipline, loyalty, and respect for authority. Kerik's biggest moment came after the events of September 11, 2001. During a time of deep uncertainty, he stood beside Mayor Rudy Giuliani and became one of the city's most visible leaders. His strong presence and calm attitude made him a national name. Just a few years later, in 2004, he was nominated for a top position in the federal government, Secretary of Homeland Security. But that opportunity quickly began to fall apart. The same connections that helped him rise, his close relationships with wealthy builders, donors, and city insiders, started raising serious questions. When federal officials began reviewing his background, they found financial and personal issues that didn't match the clean image expected for such a powerful job. What started as simple questions about his finances turned into a full investigation. The findings showed that Kerik had accepted home renovations and other benefits from people who did business with the city. He did not report the value of these favors on his tax forms, and when asked about them under oath or during government interviews, he gave misleading answers. The problems included renovations to his apartment in Riverdale, New York, that were never listed as taxable income. There were also unreported loans and payments from businessmen with ties to the construction industry. Kerik later gave incorrect information on loan documents and to federal investigators. These actions led to charges related to false statements and incorrect tax filings. In simpler terms, the government believed he accepted valuable favors, did not report them properly, and then covered up the truth when questioned. So why would someone in his position risk it? Many who followed the case believed that Kerik wanted to protect his career and reputation. He had worked hard to reach the top and had powerful friends watching. Admitting to accepting personal benefits from business contacts could have damaged everything he had built. Hiding those details in his mind may have seemed like a way to keep his public image intact. But those decisions ended up breaking the trust that comes with public service. Kerik eventually admitted to the wrongdoing instead of going through a long trial. In November 2009, he pleaded guilty to 8 federal charges, including false tax filings and false statements to government officials. The plea confirmed that he had accepted benefits without properly reporting them and had given untrue information during official reviews. The courtroom moment was a sharp contrast to his earlier fame. Reporters described it as a fall from grace. A man once celebrated as New York's top cop, now standing in front of a judge, accepting responsibility for his actions. In February 2010, the judge sentenced him to 4 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. He was also ordered to pay nearly $188,000 in restitution. Federal agencies, including the FBI and the IRS, played key roles in uncovering the full picture of his finances. In May 2010, Kerik began serving his sentence. For someone who once led the city's police department, being processed into the prison system was a shocking reality. His downfall unfolded step by step. The nomination for Homeland Security opened the door to deeper background checks. Those checks revealed the home renovations, the unreported payments, and the misleading paperwork. Investigators followed the money trail, found inconsistencies, and eventually brought formal charges. What seemed like isolated errors at first became evidence of a pattern of dishonesty. Kerik spent about 3 years in custody and was released in May 2013. The time away changed his public standing completely. After returning home, he wrote a book about his experiences and slowly re-entered public life. He began working as a consultant and commentator, often speaking about criminal justice reform and government accountability. In 2020, President Donald Trump granted him a full pardon. That decision cleared his record of punishment, though the events themselves remained part of the public record. The pardon also reignited debate about how political connections influence forgiveness at the highest level of power. Bernard Kerik's story is one of high rise and hard fall, a man who went from being a symbol of leadership and strength in New York City to someone forced to confront the consequences of his own decisions. In the last case, what began as a routine call became one of the most defining images of modern history. Derek Chauvin grew up in a quiet suburban area near the Twin Cities. After serving a period in the Army Reserve, he joined the Minneapolis Police Department. For years, he worked regular patrol shifts and sometimes took off-duty security jobs. He stayed mostly out of the public eye, but one video changed everything. On May 25, 2020, Chauvin, wearing his police uniform, restrained a 46-year-old man named George Floyd. He pressed his knee against Floyd's neck for several minutes while Floyd repeatedly said he could not breathe. Several bystanders recorded the incident on their phones. Floyd's voice, gasping for air, was heard across those recordings and soon around the world. Those images became the center of a major legal case that started with local anger and grew into a national and then federal investigation. According to the public record, police officers had arrived after a report about a possible counterfeit bill. Floyd was handcuffed and placed face down on the street. Chauvin kept his knee on Floyd's neck for more than 9 minutes, even after Floyd stopped moving. Medical examiners later ruled that Floyd's passing was caused by another person's actions. Public videos, medical reports, and witness statements painted a clear picture. Prosecutors said the restraint used by Chauvin was not part of lawful police action, but an excessive and dangerous use of force. They also pointed to Chauvin's past record, showing that he had faced earlier complaints and use of force incidents. Once the video went viral, Chauvin's life changed quickly. He was charged in state court with serious offenses, including manslaughter. Later, he was also indicted by federal authorities for violating civil rights. His state trial began in the spring of 2021 and was broadcast live to millions of viewers around the world. Prosecutors built their case around the restraint itself. They showed the video, called medical experts who explained how oxygen and circulation can be restricted, and brought in police trainers who said Chauvin's actions went against department rules. The defense disagreed. They argued that Floyd's passing might have been caused by health issues, possible substance use, or a stress-related medical condition. They also claimed that the officers believed Floyd was resisting arrest. The trial became a debate over 2 different views. One side showed a man crying for help as an officer used dangerous pressure. The other side argued that several other factors led to Floyd's end. The key question was simple but important. Why did Chauvin keep his knee pressed down even after Floyd stopped moving? Prosecutors said that a trained officer should have checked for a pulse, called for medical help, and moved Floyd into a safer position. The evidence showed that Chauvin did not take those steps. The defense said he followed his training and that Floyd's passing was not his fault. The jury had to decide whether Chauvin's actions crossed the line from police restraint into criminal behavior. After long discussions, the jury gave their verdict on April 20th, 2021. Chauvin was found guilty on multiple counts, including unintentional second-degree charges, third-degree charges, and second-degree manslaughter. It was a rare outcome. A police officer convicted for taking the life of a black man while on duty. Outside the courthouse, crowds gathered and called for justice. For Chauvin, The verdict ended his police career and began his time in custody. Sentencing took place on June 25, 2021. The judge said that Chauvin had misused his authority and treated Floyd with unusual cruelty. These factors increased his sentence well above Minnesota's normal guidelines for a first-time offender. Chauvin was given 22.5 years in state prison. At the hearing, Chauvin spoke briefly. He expressed condolences to the Floyd family, but said he could not say more due to other legal matters. That short statement was his only personal comment recorded in the state sentencing. Even after that, federal charges still remained. The U.S. Department of Justice later brought new charges. A grand jury indicted Chauvin for violating Floyd's civil rights by using excessive force. In December 2021, he admitted in federal court that his actions were willful and unlawful. In July 2022, a federal judge sentenced him to 252 months, or 21 years, for those charges. Under the agreement, his federal and state sentences were served at the same time, and he was transferred to the federal prison system. The federal case had its own rules and paperwork, separate from the state conviction. Outside those major trials were smaller but still serious legal issues. Chauvin and his wife were charged with tax violations after being accused of not reporting income and claiming to live outside Minnesota. He later pleaded guilty in that case and received a sentence that ran at the same time as his other terms. Records and reports showed that his life had included local work, military service, and a marriage that eventually fell apart under the pressure of his legal battles. Life in prison brought its own challenges. In late 2023, Chauvin was seriously injured in an incident inside a federal facility in Arizona. Reports said he was hurt while in the prison's law library and required immediate medical care. After that, he was moved to several different federal facilities, finally ending up in one located in Texas. These transfers highlighted the risks that high-profile inmates often face inside prison walls. As for the question of motive, prosecutors did not need to prove racial intent to secure a conviction. Instead, they focused on whether Chauvin's actions were legally unreasonable. They presented evidence, videos, and expert testimony to show that his restraint went beyond lawful force. The defense tried to shift attention toward Floyd's health and possible substance use. In the end, the jury agreed with the prosecution, ruling that Chauvin's actions met the definitions of both unlawfully taking a life and manslaughter under Minnesota law. Today, Chauvin's convictions and sentences mark the end of a long legal process. He will spend decades in federal and state custody. Beyond the courtroom, this case started a worldwide discussion about policing, training, and how complaints against officers are handled in the United States.